Hey guys, this is Krista from the Moratorium. Do you like grisly gore and mysteries? Of course you do. That is why I suggest you subscribe to my blog, Suspended Animation, Dormant Stories Waiting to be Told, where we at the Moratorium offer a number of lurid tales from axemen running around New Orleans to phantoms in Texarkana. And if you're feeling especially generous, head over to our Patreon, where for just a couple bucks a month, you can help the Moratorium grow. And that would be pretty kick-ass. And remember, long live VHS.
Any other story would be over by now. Butch DeFeo murdered his entire family and would be locked away for the rest of his life. But this story, the legend of Amityville, has only just begun. Cue the music.
And in 3, 2, 1, I already forgot it.
You will be soon as big as a giant, or like all the others, dead.
You think I imagined all of it, don't you? You think I'm insane?
That's feng shui.
A match made in a bathroom, just floating into the void.
You know what, Krista?
Yes.
I have been trying to create a comfortable space here at my house. You know, I've got a lot of weird shit hanging around. I think we have 6 or 7 Ouija boards that are actually posted around the house. Some of them pretty old, like almost 100 years old, you know, and I welcome a haunting. I think a haunting would actually improve my property values, and I could probably get a lot more out of my house if a poltergeist was, if I could prove that my house was built on an Indian burial ground, that would probably help too.
What if the ghosts are hostile and they come in the form of pigs with red eyes and...
Or how about a rape ghost? I could go for a rape ghost.
A rape ghost.
Rape ghost. No, I welcome anything. Hey, I don't have to live here. I can always move and then, sell it or, write a book about my house. It doesn't look near as cool as this freaking house.
I mean, you might even get a movie deal.
Do books even sell anymore? Do people even write books? Are books a thing? Yeah, that was my segue into something else. So.
I'm not real sure where you're going with that, but...
Yeah. Anyway, hey, welcome to another special edition of the Moratorium. I'm Tim Kornman. And again with me is Krista Funk.
Krista!
And today we are covering still the Amityville Horror. The pretty little New England town of Amityville has a problem with ghosts, or does it?
I think not.
You think not? Wow. You think it's a hoax?
I hate to...
Oh, wait. If you want to hear if Krista thinks this is a hoax, listen to the whole damn episode. I'm not going to tell you here. You got to wait.
It's the great mystery.
Yeah, it's a good mystery. Before we go too far into it, we mentioned last week about the possibility of this house being built on Indian burial ground. That was one of the theories that one of the parapsychologists was talking about. But you mentioned the Ketchums, and I kind of looked into the Ketchums, but not a whole lot. What do you have on the Ketchums?
Well, this was mentioned in Anson's book.
Okay.
And as far as I know, the Native Americans that in that area completely rejected this idea that there was this Indian burial ground or whatever that had any kind of demonic power. They just wrote all of that off as complete nonsense.
Now, wasn't there supposedly a statue of
There was this guy
Ketchum?
that was, supposedly related to the Salem witchcraft trials. And I got to tell you, I have never read anything regarding the Salem witchcraft trials that involved this guy. I'm not real sure what the connection is there.
Maybe we need to go into the Salem witch trials at some point.
Yeah, no, that's a cool subject.
But I was going through some more documentary stuff, and this house, the Amityville, where the Amityville sits on, is it 110 or 112 Ocean Avenue?
112 Ocean Avenue.
The house that was on that property was moved when the original owners built this house. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting that this was not the original house that was on 112 Ocean Avenue.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So, was that house haunted? No, they just moved it.
People do move houses. I mean, the people that lived behind my dad, literally, they moved to a different state and they moved their house, picked up their house and moved it.
You're like, you know what? I like this house and we could probably just, tape everything to the floor. Let's just move the whole house.
I mean, I'm sure it's an insane process to do so, but people, you can move a house.
Yeah. So let's get into the thick of this story because we left off with the DeFeos. We left off with actually Butch DeFeo. He confessed to killing all 6 family members.
He did.
Was he coerced into that? Is that one of his defenses?
So there's a rumor, that Michael Brigante, Louise DeFeo's father, was there at the house the night the family was discovered and was seen outside yelling at Ronald DeFeo and, how could you do this, yada, yada, but also telling him, you're going to take the fall for this. You're going to take the fall for this alone. Stop this nonsense about your sister. There was this claim that Dawn was actually the one that wanted them dead and that she had been the one that actually committed the murders. Supposedly, Michael Brigante is out there telling him, you're not going to drag this family's name through the mud anymore. You're going to take sole responsibility for this. And indeed, Ronald DeFeo claimed several times throughout his life that Michael Brigante was trying to kill him or wanted him dead.
Okay.
And that it was their mob connections, whatever, that made him fearful that they could do this. But of course, his credibility, his word is about as factual as the Weekly World News. And because of that...
You mean the paper?
It's really hard to take anything he says and go, yeah, I mean, that totally, you can't believe anything he says. I mean... Yeah, Michael Brigante was there, and yeah, he probably was really distraught at what had happened and horrified, and probably did actually ask him, how could you do this? Mm-hmm. If he thought already that Ronald DeFeo Jr. was guilty, he certainly wasn't the only one, because as we talked about, as police started investigating the story, they were hard pressed to find anybody who had anything good to say about Ronald DeFeo Jr. or his father. One was a troublemaker, the other was tyrannical. Mm-hmm.
And they all possibly were doing dirty, dirty shit. Running money, laundering money, cooking the books. This whole family seemed crooked.
Well, I don't know that it would be the whole family because obviously...
Okay. The little kids, I guess.
Yeah, obviously the kids have nothing to do with this. I don't see a little 9-year-old John Matthew DeFeo out there, doing any mafia work, or 13-year-old Allison DeFeo for that matter.
Hey, mules come in all different sizes.
But I did think it's interesting that, the picture that was painted of, and it might totally be accurate, that Ronald DeFeo Jr. just showed up for work whenever he wanted to, but he was paid anyway, when he argued, that in reality he was making these runs for the mob. He was making these deliveries, and that was his actual job title. But again, Weekly World News.
Oh, there's so many stories about him making deposits. There was something about he had an account of $20,000 that he said that he was robbed of, and he was trying to make this big deposit for the Buick dealership.
And he was accused of stealing it, yeah.
Right. And his last interview that I watched, he stays true to that story, saying, yeah, he was robbed.
He also said that there was something like $3 million buried under his house.
Let's go dig it up right now. I'm ready. Don't mind us, guys.
He's a character. He's interesting. I don't necessarily mean that complimentary, but he was interesting. Well, I'd really like to begin actually with November 18th, 1974. This would be 4 days after the DeFeos were killed. So this is 4 days after the murders. Ronald DeFeo Jr. has been arrested. He's confessed to killing his family. Mm-hmm. And he's already, I think, started giving the first of many bizarre claims as to what happened.
Mm-hmm. When they first took him into custody, did they thought that maybe his mob story was true, so they were holding him kind of in a protective custody?
He was put into protective custody, but then, of course, he confessed to the murders. Anyway, on November 18th, 1974, this was the day that the DeFeo family was laid to rest.
Okay.
There was one funeral for the whole family rather than having 6 different funerals. It was held at the St. Martin of Tours Catholic Church. It's in Farmingdale, New York. It's right down the road from Amityville. It's where the DeFeos went to church. The New York Times stated that there was over 1,000 people there. This church was packed. There was a crowd of people inside. There's a crowd of people outside. There was all manner of news media there. They're all outside. When the funeral was over, they were taken down the road to St. Charles Cemetery, where they were finally laid to rest.
Okay.
The New York Times had a picture of the family, of the graveside service anyway, and you can see all 6 of these caskets lined up in a row. And I think, to me, that photo is the real Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
I feel like, this gets overlooked, definitely got overlooked later on as, the Lutzes and all of that came in. But that photo, it really made it real. It's not just a story. And it's not just a story, but it's not necessarily a tragic or a scary story. It's a tragic story. What happened to the DeFeos.
Oh, yeah.
After the funeral was over, after we've laid the DeFeos to rest, the question then became what to do with the DeFeos' estate.
Okay.
And this, of course, included the house at 112 Ocean Avenue. The DeFeos were a wealthy family. They had money, they had assets. And whenever Michael Brigante bought that house, it turned out that he had actually put it in his daughter's and his son-in-law's name. So it was in Ronald and Louise DeFeo's names. Okay. And they're dead. Their children are dead. So with that being said, the DeFeo estate was going to have to go into probate court. And it was during probate court, it was during this process that they made the unfortunate discovery that the surviving member of the DeFeo family, Ronald DeFeo Jr., stands to inherit the entire DeFeo estate.
Okay.
So he now is actually the rightful owner of the house on 112 Ocean Avenue.
Now he's set to make a lot of money while he's in prison for 6 counts of murder, second-degree murder.
That's pretty messed up. It didn't matter that he had killed his family. And it was actually, I read that it was actually during their funeral that he was officially indicted on 6 counts of second-degree murder.
Oh, wow.
And it didn't matter. He was still entitled to all this property. Their boat, their house, their cars, their money, this $3 million that he says is buried under the house, all of it. So I'm not real sure. Anson didn't really go into it. What the legal loophole was that they found, but ultimately it was decided we're going to sell this house anyway. And it was decided that the DeFeos and the Brigantes would sell the house and then would split the money evenly between both families, even though her father bought the house. This is the deal that they make. I think it's a misconception that the house just sat there, because nobody wanted it because of this awful thing that happened there,
I'm surprised it wasn't ransacked and burned to the ground.
I think it's a misconception that that's why it just sat there for just a little over a year. I think really the real reason is there was this, debate over the DeFeo estate. All of that had to be sorted out, and all of that takes forever. It takes a long time to do that. And then you have all that combined with the fact that the legal owner of the house is, this dude who just got indicted for murder. and it's going to be a process trying to transfer the title into somebody else's name. Also, it turned out Anson wrote in his book that the house wasn't actually listed in the paper.
Okay.
It had been picked up by a realtor, Conkin Realty. They sold houses on Long Island, but they hadn't actually listed the house for sale publicly.
Okay.
And that would also hinder people from showing an interest in the house, you know, if they don't even know that it's for sale.
Right.
But it was around the 1st of December in 1975. And George Lutz calls, he calls a realtor. Her name was, Anson said it was a realtor named Edith Evans. And he asks her, you know, tells her he's looking to buy a house on Long Island and asks her if she can show him some houses for sale. She tells him that she just got a house, but I really don't know when this realtor company, you know, actually picked up the house on 112 Ocean Avenue. But she tells him that she just got it. It's in the $80,000-$90,000 range, which was a little pricey for Lutz, but it was really spacious. It was charming AF, and it had a boathouse, and she wanted to show it to him. And he was intrigued.
Because they had a boat.
It turns out that George Lutz was really into boats, owned a couple of them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he really did like about that house was the boathouse. He could save money by moving his boats to Amityville for free rather than pay the fees at the marina to store them there. He also closed his office. He never actually set up his office in the basement, but his intention was to close his office and set it up in his basement. And this way he would eliminate paying rent for office space.
Okay.
But before all that, George and Kathy Lutz, now they are a young couple. Anson said that George was 28 at the time, and he put Kathy at 30. But different sources have them at different ages, but they're young. Both of them have been married before. George Lutz had no children. Kathy Lutz had 3. She had 2 boys and a girl. Her oldest son was 9. Her middle son, Christopher, was 7. And her youngest daughter, Melissa, they called her Missy, she was 5.
And the oldest was Danny.
Yes, and they're newlyweds. I'm not sure exactly when they got married, but they haven't been married very long. They're starting out, and they're buying their first home together.
I think they both sold their already existing homes to help purchase this house. I saw an interview with George and Kathy Lutz, and George loves to talk to the camera, it seems like, but George states that they looked at 50 different houses.
Yeah. That's what Lutz said.
Before they looked at this one. But
yeah, Lutz said that he looked around, that they'd looked at 40, 50 some odd houses before they were taken to this one. And they knew, before they even got there, both of them knew about the murders already. And that was just it. This house, they referred to it as the DeFeo house because that's what it was. It wasn't the Amityville house yet. It was the DeFeo house. And they knew, they were aware of the murders. And George Lutz said that this wasn't a deterrent for them, that they got there and they just fell in love with it. You know, it had everything that they wanted. It was big. It was spacious. There was a room for everybody. There was a pool. There was a boathouse. There was a big basement. I mean, it was just perfect. And for the price, he felt that it was, just a really good deal. And now there was the issue of the title. And according to Jay Anson, they actually bought that house. They bought it for $80,000, but then had to put an extra $40,000 in escrow until a legal title could be put in their name.
Okay.
According to him, technically, when they moved into that house on December 18th, 1975, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was technically still the owner of the house.
Oh, okay.
So, I just found that kind of interesting that, to get that house, it was moving in, not really knowing if you were going to be able to secure this title.
So still on unsteady ground, yeah.
Yeah, but they moved in, and George Lutz said that when they went to look at the house, he said that he made a kind of an interesting observation. That he was in an upstairs room and looked out the bedroom and just happened to notice the house next door. And he noticed that all the windows facing the house was covered so that they couldn't see the DeFeo house.
Okay.
He just thought that was a really odd observation, Anson didn't paint him that way as a believer in that sort of thing. Now, there's been some stories that'll pop up later on that he was into that stuff. But for right now, houses don't have bad memories. People do. This is the line in the movie that he gives Kathy,
Yes.
According to George Lutz and Jay Anson, Kathy was not spooked at all by these murders. She was in love with the house.
He said when she stepped into like the foyer, she was just smitten. Like,
yeah.
She's barely getting into the house and she's like, this is it. This is home.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were just absolutely, smitten with this house. I mean, it had everything and then some that they could possibly want. George Lutz said that they went home and had a conversation with their children, which I wish I could have been privy to this conversation because I'm curious how it went.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had to tell them about the DeFeo family. They had to tell them what happened in this house. And furthermore, had to tell them, hey, this entire house was a crime scene. Just about every bedroom had someone who was killed in it. So, are you guys going to be okay with this? Because you have to sleep in there.
And by the way, all of their stuff, we own that now too, right? You're okay with that, right?
Yeah, and there were some things that were taken out of the house. Like, for example, George Lutz, Anson tells the story about George Lutz. They closed on the house, and then he's in the van. He owned a land surveying company. So he had a company van, and he had a trailer on the back, and all of this stuff that he had purchased from the DeFeo family that was taken out of the house and put into storage. Among these items were he bought several air conditioners. He bought 2 sets of washers and dryers.
Yeah.
He bought a fridge, their deep freeze. One of the items, though, however, that was in storage was Ronald and Louise DeFeo's bed frame, which was not included in that purchase. That was left in storage. However, they did purchase the children's bedroom furniture, particularly Allison DeFeo's bedroom furniture.
I'm sure that's chocolate stain, kid. That's fine. It's just chocolate. She liked chocolate milk.
And one of the things about moving from a small place to a ginormous place is that you probably aren't going to have enough furniture to actually furnish this house. And that was indeed the case with the Lutzes. They were like, we can't actually furnish this house. Mm-hmm. And to my understanding, Missy Lutz didn't have any bedroom furniture at all. So, here's Allison DeFeo's bright and cheery bedroom, and they're like, oh, perfect. And so this became her room. The boys, they were allowed to pick their own room, and guess which room they picked? So they're up there in Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s room on the 3rd floor with the creepy eyes and his messed up wallpaper.
Mm. And it said the setup for them with their beds were almost, the footboards of their beds were almost touching. They were kind of like at an L in that room.
It's funny to me that those boys with all those bedrooms would decide to share a room.
Yeah, maybe it was the wallpaper.
Maybe it was the wallpaper. It might have been,
We're a smaller family. There are 6 bedrooms. One of you kids, you can take the sewing room. It's empty.
So
yes, so
now we're going to have to, and that's kind of the weird thing about the Lutzes is they only stayed in that house 28 days. So fast forward 28 days later, it's now January 1976.
They were in the house through Christmas. Mm-hmm. So they spent one Christmas in the house.
One Christmas,
I wonder what that was like.
And then they were like, peace, we're out.
Yep.
They bailed after 28 days. And according to Anson, they left in the middle of the night. They left all their stuff behind. Mm-hmm. And that is where his book ends, but once the Lutzes left the house at 112 Ocean Avenue, it wasn't long after that, to my understanding, that George Lutz contacted a dude named Paul Hoffman. He was a writer for Good Housekeeping. He contacted this other dude named Kaplan to investigate his story and was telling them, what happened to him and his wife and his family in that house. And boy, did the Lutz have an interesting story. Mm-hmm. Good Housekeeping did publish an article about it. I want to say it came out in 1976, early 1976, and it came out with the line, "Our dream house was haunted." That's what it said. Our dream house was haunted. And it's this whole story about what had happened to the DeFeos. In the meantime, this Kaplan guy, he and his wife, they're paranormal investigators. This guy was a self-proclaimed vampirologist?
Yes.
Didn't even know that was a thing, but that's a thing.
And I guess, he was at odds with the Lutzes at some point. But there were so many different claims that the Lutzes said happened in the house.
Well, Kaplan, apparently, George Lutz wants him to, obviously he wants the story validated, and I can't think of any other reason to contact Kaplan other than to, hey, you're a paranormal investigator, validate my ghost story.
Yeah, in one of the interviews, though, he said he cut ties with him when he realized, this guy's a vampirologist.
That's what Lutz claimed. He claimed that he's a vampirologist, and that definitely didn't make him credible to me, But Kaplan, his widow anyway, she argued, okay, well, my husband went to him and was like, listen, I'm going to investigate your story. And if it's legit, I will say so. If it's not legit, I'm going to say that too. Mm-hmm. And this didn't go over well with Lutz,
Nope. Immediately, like the next day, sorry, we're going with somebody else.
Yeah, he fires the Kaplans, telling them that, because Kaplan, had also, I believe, had said something in an interview with Good Housekeeping that he was going to investigate the Lutz haunting at 112 Ocean Avenue. And the Lutzes turned around and fired the Kaplans saying, you brought us all this exposure and we didn't want that. We didn't want this publicity. And which is weird for a couple who's literally in the middle of trying to sell their story.
Right.
And find people to investigate it and validate it. And that's what they're doing.
But wasn't there a press release just before they got in touch with Kaplan?
Well, he fires this couple, and then she said literally that evening they're giving a press conference, which she's like, well, that's weird if, your argument was you didn't want this publicity, but here you are going on giving a press conference. So I think George Lutz, it would appear anyway that the Lutzes didn't want the Kaplans, and that's the irony there, is it's the vampirologist that's going, something smells like bullshit here, That's just, kind of throws me off a little bit about that, that he's the first person to go, hey, is this story even true? Anybody want to look into that?
So what is their story, though? Because they said that immediately after they moved into the house that they started experiencing supernatural events.
Oh, they made all sorts of claims.
What led to the Lutzes leaving after 28 days?
The Lutzes made quite a few claims. And indeed, it began day one. George said that from the very first night they moved in, he would habitually wake up at 3:15 a.m.
Okay.
And he would do this, and why 3:15? Well, because this is when the medical examiner estimated that the shooting took place, and this is when the DeFeos were killed.
Coincidence?
Yeah, so immediately this is like really spooky, right? He would get up in the middle of the night, and he felt this urge to go to the window and look out at the boathouse. He would, he would have to check the kids. He would have to check the front door, and he would look out the window and check the boathouse. On their very first night there, and I'll give Anson this, it's well written. It really is. It's well written. George Lutz goes to the window. He looks out at the boathouse, and he sees this shadow figure outside that's next to their dog, Harry. They've got a Labrador, and he's chained up outside, which I think is so mean. It is December in New York.
New York.
Come on, George Lutz, you heartless bastard. Take that dog in the house. Come on.
Yeah.
Dude, seriously.
If you're cold, they're cold. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're leaving him out there with shadow boathouse demons. Okay,
that's right.
That's not cool. That is not cool, George. So, anyway. And that's what he sees. He sees this figure, this shadow figure, and it's moving closer to his dog. And Harry, of course, is freaking out. He's barking. He's going hysterical. So George Lutz wants to get out there and, save his dog, who should have been in the house to begin with, only for him to realize that it's actually the door to his boathouse. It's flapping open, and because of the light, it looks like the shadow.
Okay. It's an honest mistake.
Yeah, and the eyes, the mind do play tricks on people. I mean, we're designed to make patterns out of things,
Yes.
Well, we're, to try to make out an object.
There's a name for that, and I don't remember what it is. Somebody email us.
Yeah, let us know. Let's get back to us on that. But this is what Lutz does, and he thinks he sees a figure, but it's really the door. But this happens night after night. This continues to happen. And what's really irritating George is that he's locking this door, and he's making a mental note. I have locked this door. Here's me locking this door. See me locking this door? I'm locking it. And then in the middle of the night, he's waking up at 3:15, and that door is flinging wide open. So there's that. And then you have, other things, cold spots. For example, George Lutz can't seem to get warm.
Yeah, well, it's winter in New York. You just bought a big, probably old, drafty house.
Yeah. And everybody else would be warm, and there's George Lutz. He just cannot. He's just feeding more and more and more logs into the fire, and he's habitually chopping wood. He's just obsessed with chopping wood and feeding more wood into this fire. He is missing work. He's supposed to be setting up this office in his basement and getting back to his business, but he's not doing that.
I also read that he quit eating. He had lost a lot of weight because he didn't feel the need to eat. He wasn't hungry. And constantly chopping wood. He's probably getting a lot of exercise there too.
He's constantly chopping wood, and every day that they stay in that house, according to George, he just grew worse and worse. He just looked sicker and sicker, like he was coming down with pneumonia or something, and he felt like he was coming down with pneumonia. He felt like shit all the time.
But at the first day that they moved into the house, didn't they have a priest come over to bless the house?
So the priest in Jay Anson's book, now his name was changed entirely for the movie. Right. Father Delaney was not his name. Jay Anson called him Father Mancuso. Okay. Online, he had a completely different name. Right. And this guy, yes, he came over to bless the house. The problem there is he said that of course, we haven't made it to the publication of the book yet, but he did later argue that everything that had been said about him was completely untrue. Yes, he went and blessed the house, but the truth was, he really didn't know the Lutzes that well. Anson said in his book that Kathy grew up with him. He had helped her through her divorce, and he was really close with her children and all of this stuff, when in reality, he really honestly didn't know him that well. He had been asked to come over and bless the house, and that is what he did. But he wasn't greeted by 10,000 flies, and he didn't hear a voice that told him to get out.
You mean that said, get out?
Get out. Yeah, he said none of this happened. He was never in a car accident trying to get back to the house. He was never injured. He would never fell ill, and he never went blind. He just said that all of that surrounding his experience, his part in the story was completely made up.
Now, there is a documentary that I watched called My Amityville Horror, which had Danny talk about the stories, and I'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, but he stated that the first night in the house that he was bringing in the boxes to his bedroom when he saw the priest coming in. The priest went in and supposedly blessed the sewing room and said the sewing room was like the coldest, had a cold room. There were several cold spots that they said were in the house, but the sewing room was the coldest. And that's where supposedly the priest had his confrontation with the voice saying get out and the flies while he was trying to bless that room. And Danny said while he saw the priest and he was welcoming him, saying, oh yeah, he wanted to talk to the priest And he put the box down, and by the time he left his bedroom to go find the priest had already left and said, "Hey, fuck this, I'm out." I think most of that was,
Anson tells this whole story about how Father Mancuso, as his name is in the book, is, went to lunch with, 3 other priests. And then after lunch, he was going to stop by, because he was going to be in Amityville. He would stop by the Lutz's house and bless their house. He said that Father Mancuso did not know about the murders there. And then it wasn't until he had this lunch with these other priests that he was made aware of the house when they asked him where he was going.
3 priests at a luncheon. And 2 of them are going, oh,
that's the DeFeo house. But that's actually what Anson says happens. That one of them was like, oh, you're going to the DeFeo house. And he said that the priest was feeling really apprehensive. He just really didn't want to go. And the closer he got to the Lutz's house, the more ill he felt.
Mm-hmm. It couldn't have been by the fish sandwich that he had earlier.
Right. Should have washed your hands when you went to the bathroom. I don't know. But
stop touching your face.
But again, the priest came out and said, that all of that was completely made up. Like, none of it happened. Yeah, like, the only thing that was true about it was that he wouldn't bless the house.
Yeah.
Kathy Lutz did say that she had an aunt that was a nun, and that the nun had come to visit and became violently ill and rushed out of the home as soon as she got there and absolutely refused to come back. And then when she talked to her on the phone later, her aunt's telling her, it's really weird. I felt fine as soon as I left your house. Mm-hmm. But whether or not the aunt even exists or corroborated her story, I'm not sure. But this priest, he certainly did not corroborate the Lutz's story.
Yeah.
It's really hard to separate which part of the story were things that the Lutz's told Anson and which part of it was, Anson exaggerating it.
Right. And I think that there was also a claim that the priest tried to call the house, and this was also in the movie, that there was just static on the line, that he was never able to contact the Lutzes. And I think most of that was fabricated as well.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the only thing that was truthful where the priest was concerned was that he came over to bless the house. Mm-hmm. But he did not have a relationship with Kathy and her children. And I don't think that he had ever met George Lutz before until he actually went to the house. Anson says that he ran into George Lutz when he got to the house and asked him, is it true? Was this the DeFeo's house? And there's George Lutz, yeah, it's true. Mm-hmm. Is that okay? Is that a problem? The priest said that didn't happen either. And he said he never argued with the church about whether or not there were some kind of demonic force in that family. He never believed there was anything demonic in the house. It was just a house. Mm-hmm. There's the Lutz's account, their article in Good Housekeeping, and this is gaining traction. Their story is gaining traction, which I personally believe was the point. You want people to gain an interest in your story, which is why you want people to investigate it. You just don't want people like Kaplan who are going to debunk it,
Yeah.
Because then you'd make no money off of it.
Exactly. Somebody stated that the original hardback book listed the priest as driving I don't know what. Ford? Well, that was in the paperback, but in the original hardback book, it was a different car.
Stephen King pointed this out. I think.
Yeah.
I think I read that it went from a tan Ford to a different car and then back to a tan Ford.
I think at one point it was listed as a Vega, which the hood on a Vega opens up backwards. And in the book, the priest was supposedly driving down the road and the hood flips up and shatters his windshield. Well, that couldn't happen in a Vega because the hood opens up the other direction. So in the paperback version, it's like they corrected it and changed the car so it actually fit the story. I understand, you're trying to make a story, and this is what I think they've talked about as being based on true events. I mean, we see that a lot in different movies, and it's going to capture your attention if you think it's, oh my God, this is true, but this is how much of it is true and how much of it is fiction.
But that's what got Anson in trouble whenever he published his book, is that he published it and marketed it, sold it as a true story. Mm-hmm. He didn't say based on a true story. He didn't say inspired by a true story. He said, this is a true story.
Gotcha.
And I would say it backfired, but it really didn't, because he made a ton of money off of it. But granted, he died. He made a ton of money. The book sales were amazing, but he died a year later. So it's not like he got to enjoy it very long. You know what I mean? And he was confronted about his book. You know, he was asked, you know, doesn't it bother you that, you know, you've exaggerated this story, you know? And his response to that was, no, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm making a ton of money off of this book.
I'm fanning myself with hundreds.
Yeah, like I am not, I'm rolling around in money right now. This does not bother me.
And I think the Lutzes did make some money off of the book. I think they made roughly, I think I read $250,000 from the book. And actually, the movie, they made $130,000.
That's not counting the amount of the interviews that they've given, you know, the articles like Good Housekeeping or whatever. You know, they're being paid for all of those as well. I mean, they are looking to sell that story, and they did.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of speculation that the reason why they left the house is because they couldn't afford it.
That could be true.
Truthfully, they were not even making one payment within 28 days.
Yeah, that movie, I was going to wait till we got to it, but it's relevant now. Yeah, that movie would have you think that, like, bills were just piling up, you know? Yeah. And, I mean, they've not been there long enough for bills to pile up.
Exactly. We don't have a lot of hardships. They had food in the house because they left it behind. They left everything.
They did.
When did the Warrens get into the mix?
So this story is gaining traction. We don't have a book yet, but it's gaining traction. It's 1976. And like I said, in my opinion, I think George and Kathy Lutz absolutely wanted the publicity, even though they said they didn't. And we're absolutely looking for somebody to validate their story. This is what Kaplan was supposed to do. He's a vampirologist. How could he not validate my story? I think George Lutz was surprised when the vampirologist of all people was like, hey, so there's some inconsistencies here, like, you know, and started asking him questions, you know. But Ed and Lorraine Warren, here's famous paranormal investigators.
They were well known at this point?
I don't know. I think so. Oh. But they were, I mean, on the complete other side of that, you know. Lorraine Warren said that I think one of them, her or Ed one, made the comment that there were legions of spirits in that house. Okay. It's not one or two, or the DeFeo family. It's legions.
Legions,
Tim. Legions. There's a fuckload of ghosts in this house, okay? She said that she saw them, a whole bunch of them, and they were, like, covered in, do I dare say, I think she said white sheets, you know, and what I'm imagining was not the same.
Yes.
You know, but Ed and Lorraine Warren, their investigation of the house was a big deal because, I mean, they had a camera crew with them. They had a reporter with them. They had a
lot of people were there with them, right? I mean, they called in like the freaking cavalcade of investigators to stay the night in this house.
Every manner of psychic and whatnot is now like wanting an opportunity to get into the DeFeo house, you know, like, which is now becoming the Amityville house. Mm-hmm. Certainly after that book came out, it's forever the Amityville house. After that, the DeFeos sadly became a footnote, you know, really. Right. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were going to be on a televised, this was going to be a televised program, them going into this house and investigating it. They were going to do, and they did do this seance, and they were going to try to contact the spirits and all of this stuff. And then they did all that, except, and there were these little things like, you know, the cameraman levitating or cold spots or things like that, or all the weird shit that Lorraine said. But the freakiest thing, truly, like, nothing happened. You know, it didn't turn out to be the breakthrough, you know, paranormal experience that they thought it was going to be. However,
I
would say probably, if it's not because I do believe you could fake photos and could then, I would say the freakiest thing to honestly to come out of that investigation was they put this camera on the second floor, in the corner of the second floor. Mm-hmm. And you could see, you know, it would take these photos. It took several at a time. It was time lapse. There would be a little bit of time that would go by, and then it would snap several more, and then so on. You know, you could see the entire second floor, and you could see that Allison DeFeo's room, or what was later Missy's Lutz's room, the door was open. It was dark in her room. It was dark upstairs. And you can see that in the photos. And there is one photo in particular that shows what is very clearly a little boy.
Dun, dun, dun. It's
dun,
the
dun,
creepy
dun.
fucking photo, too. It really is.
He is standing in the doorway and appears to be looking directly at the camera.
Yeah. And his eyes are like incredibly white.
And his eyes are like glowing. He's a cat.
And they swear that they did not have there were no kids in the house with them during this night.
Yes, they said there were no kids there. That there should have been absolutely zero reason for this image to pop up anywhere in these photos. And yet it did. And so, you know, they don't actually come out and say, hey, this is John Matthew DeFeo, or this is Mark DeFeo, or even claim that it's even one of the DeFeo children. A picture of it was given to the Lutzes, and they showed it to their daughter. Mm-hmm. And again, with their bizarre claims, she said, oh, that's Jody.
Right. So who's Jody?
Jody, and I mean, I had an active imagination too. You know,
yesterday, this afternoon, or when you were a kid.
I fully believe that she had an imaginary friend named Jody, or, okay, you know, or something like that, you know, but kids do that. They have these overactive imaginations. And a lot of the times kids think they see things that they don't. Remember when we were looking into the Girl Scout murders and they all thought they saw something hanging from the tree? That just wasn't there, you know?
Yeah.
Kids say the darndest things. But Missy Lutz claimed that she had a friend named Jody while she lived there.
Right.
This Jody was imaginary.
I mean, she drew a picture of him.
She drew a picture of Jody going through the snow, which the Lutzes said there were hoof prints in the snow. Jody appeared to Missy apparently a number of different ways, usually as a child.
Okay.
But George Lutz said that, and indeed Kathy, she says that that spooky ass scene where she sees Jody out the window.
Dang. Sorry, that was like my scary sound.
You know, she says this happened. And you know what? It probably did. You know, the thing about cats is they're ninjas, and they can get anywhere, and if you shine the light on their eyes just right, they are going to glow super bright, and they are, you know, spaz attack. So, and of course, George did ask her, you know, are you sure it wasn't a cat? And she screamed and argued with him. What I saw was not a cat, you know. They argued it was a pig.
A pig.
You know, like a pig with
a demonic pig with
a demonic pig
with big teeth. There was one story that Danny told, and this was in that little documentary. And I'm going to put a link up to all of these things. Go to our YouTube page for the moratorium. There's going to be a playlist for all of these documentaries that I've been watching. There's some creepy stuff in there. I did have to pay $4 to watch this interview documentary with Danny. It's called My Amityville Horror. Thank you. But he states that he was outside with George by the boathouse, and they looked up at the window and saw the pig-like face in the window with its eyes, and they ran upstairs as fast as they could, and they ran into the room just to find Missy sleeping in bed. But they also claim that there's furniture that has been moving, like a rocking chair that was in Missy's room that was rocking back and forth. And at one point, George picks it up and he's inspecting it, saying, well, why is this chair moving on its own? It could have been the cat jumping down from a chair.
Kathy Lutz said that she actually she was like walking upstairs, putting clothes away or whatever. They were still unpacking. They hadn't, quite moved into their house, yet. So there's still all this work to be done, and she went upstairs and overheard Missy talking to or singing to her friend Jody. And that, as she was walking into the room, she could see, she got a glimpse of that rocking chair and that it was moving on its own, rocking back and forth. And, it's kind of funny. And just a side note, when Jake and Logan were born...
Your kids. Yes,
my kids.
Boys.
My
yes.
boys. When Jake and Logan were born, I have a set of twins, by the way, guys. There's my husband, there's Mike, and there's my sister. And it's late that night. And, I'm all doped up with morphine, so whatever. They just kind of told me what happened. But we're in this room, and... there's this fucking rocking chair in my room, okay?
All right.
And, I don't think it really bothered me, but, like, Mike and Misty are like, nah, I've seen the Amityville Horror. No, that rocking chair has got to go. Like, that, if that shit starts moving, I'm gonna freak out. So, like...
As you should.
I think Misty actually took a sheet and covered the chair, and I'm over there.
Oh, that doesn't make it any better.
Well, yeah, and as messed up as I am, I'm on morphine, and I'm over there like, no, that's even worse. Think I'll take my chances with the rocking chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's, I would say that, yeah, Jody was probably real to Missy. Not real.
Well,
but
imaginary friends are
an imaginary friend that, that kids, they come up with and they play with and it's fun and it's a thing. And I think George and Kathy Lutz, I think they took that character that she had created, this Jody, and exploited it, and made it something really scary. And I haven't seen Melissa Lutz, in anything. Have you?
No,
I think she's really shied away from all of this,
I've seen interviews with Christopher and with Danny.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there was going to be more with Christopher. He talked about a movie possibly to set the story straight, because everything Christopher said, he's like, all the movies got it wrong. You want to hear a story? You want to hear a scary story? Wait till I tell you the story.
Well, and I forgot to mention earlier that I think it was Amityville 3D was the Kaplan story about a guy trying to debunk the Lutz's story,
Mm-hmm. And didn't the Amityville 3 kind of opened up like the Warrens kind of doing a seance and reading in the house, and then somebody turns on the light because there was an orb flying through, and it's some guy with a fishing pole with a light attached to it, and it just kind of, just threw that out there that, you guys are just putting this on because you're trying to make a ghost story, and it was actually a ghost story. I think Meg Ryan was in part 3, by the way. Yeah.
Was she?
Go check it out. It's not a good movie, as we will talk about here in a little bit, of the many, many Amityville movies.
So many. There are so many.
But the first 3, and part 3 was in 3D, by the way.
Which was about as cool as Friday the 13th 3D.
No. Friday the 13th 3D is classic. Amityville 3D, I can hear toilets flushing. Those are the only 3 movies that actually went to the theaters. The other subsequent movies did not. They went straight to video. Anyway, we'll talk about that here in just a minute too. Well, guys, our coverage of the Amityville Horror is not even close to the end. Krista and I had a bit much to talk about to cram it all into right here. So please join us next week for part 3, the conclusion of the Amityville Horror. If you have any movie suggestions, or just want to tell us how much we really suck, you can contact us at moviemoratorium@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and long live VHS.